Moving on, folks, our next speaker for today knows full well what it's like to be under pressure, the challenges they would face and they have faced during the 2010 FIFA World Cup, during winter, and more recently during the heavy rains. He is a powerhouse, and by that I mean he works for Eskom. He has 35 years experience in both the engineering and customer service areas of the company, with a BSc in electrical engineering from the University of Natal. He has been instrumental in the development of CRM strategy. He enjoys playing the guitar, traveling, and photography when there are power outages. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Kevin von Berg.
Thanks, Landy. Thanks, Landy, and good morning, everybody. They say it's not a good thing to start off with an apology. I'm not going to apologize for the traffic. I'm not going to apologize for e-tolling. I'm recently from Natal moved up to Joburg after many years of resisting the move, but I'm not going to apologize for Nkandla. I'm not even going to apologize for the rain or the wet coal. What I am going to apologize for is that I'm replacing our glamorous Generation X General Manager of Strategy in Customer Service for Eskom. And unfortunately, it was only a very short while ago, a few days ago, in fact, that she was made aware of the fact she wouldn't be able to be with us today. So I hope you accept me as a substitute, and let's take it from there. What I would actually like to do is tell you a story. And it could be a very, very long story, because in Eskom we sometimes tend to do things a little bit slowly. But nevertheless, it's the story of what we've been doing over perhaps many years now in terms of trying to move from what might be perceived as a very large parastatal uncaring of customers into, in fact, an organization where customer experience is, in fact, becoming a way of life for us and for our customers. The roadmap that I'd like to follow, I'd like to talk a little bit about Eskom's history. We are, in fact, one of those 90-year-old Titanics that have been rumbling along that we're trying to desperately change. And as we know, with any large organization, any large ship, it takes a lot of energy, a lot of effort to change the momentum and change the direction. So we'll look a little bit about what we've been doing in the past. I want to bring in some of the information regarding what our customers are saying, have been saying of us and our changes over the years. There was a particular program that we ran for some time called the Customer Centricity Program. I want to share some information about that. And also going to the future, where we're moving from that platform, particularly in light of the constraints that we're facing in Eskom regarding the funding that we're able to receive. And that makes a profound difference to our ability as to what we can invest in. So my hope in sharing the story of what we've been doing in Eskom is that it will maybe bring some practical insights to some of the things we've done, hopefully generate some ideas amongst you, and maybe there will be some things that you will learn from. Certainly we are learning from being here, and even just witnessing the first speaker was tremendously insightful and very exciting to hear, and I've already made copious notes about some of the things that I want to take back into the company. So, over 90 years of powering South Africa. Now, the sort of timeline you see on the board was actually taken from an internal communications campaign that we ran last year. We're just over 91 years old now. It was in March of last year that we turned 90. And we obviously ran a campaign within the company to bring people up to speed with the history of the organization and bring a little bit of that knowledge back into the minds of our people. But I think if you look at the titles, the chapter headings that were done, there were little YouTube-type videos that were produced, etc., in taking our people through it. You can see that a lot of the words there talks about things like being giants and powerhouses and being this very large, very powerful electricity utility. And I think that is very often the kind of perception that we have in the minds of not only the South African public at large, but certainly our customers. Perhaps a very big organization, very engineering orientated, working with big pieces of metal that generate lethal amounts of electricity. and probably also from the point of view of the customers and the public, probably a little bit arrogant, a little bit unreachable in terms of an organization. Certainly, I think that you wouldn't really talk about Eskom and customer experience or customer satisfaction generally in the same sentence, unless you had the word bad somewhere in the middle of the sentence. So you could say that the term Eskom customer service might even be an oxymoron. Well, we're hoping to change that. So just some statistics in terms of the size of the company. We're a massive company. Our generating capacity is of the order of 42 gigawatts. We have nearly 400,000 kilometers of cables, 46,000 employees, 5 million customers. The most important number is at the bottom of the slide, the 5 million customers. But generally, if you look at what we did in Eskom, and even some of these types of shots that were in our websites, in our brochures, in our annual reports over the years, it was always pictures of large power stations, power lines disappearing into the glorious sunset, etc. And it's only really, and probably in the last 15 years or so, that we have started having a sense of customer centricity and pictures of customers. And I really want to give credit back to the days of Ian McRae and John Marie, that era of Eskom, and particularly Ian McRae with his leadership in terms of the Electricity for All campaign, where in fact he went against many of the popular thoughts of the time, had visits with people in the townships secretly and surreptitiously in order to realize this vision that he had of electricity for all. And that was really Eskom's game changer, because traditionally we were a retailer of electricity. We sold onto the municipalities. We did have a few big customers, but generally the mass market out there, you and me sitting in our houses, the people in the townships, the businesses out there, were not Eskom's direct customers. And that's all obviously changed over the years. So where does customer service fit into the Eskom supply chain? As I've indicated, we have this supply chain starting from the factory, creating the electricity, the power stations that you're aware of, moving across through into the transmission system, which takes that power across the country at a very, very high voltage, into the distribution systems, which is where you start getting the sort of lines that you see running down your street, cables underground, etc., and eventually feeding into the homes and businesses that we have. And it was interesting that until 2011, Eskom actually in our organizational structure didn't have a customer service function as a division. We had elements of customer service that were embedded within the engineering part of our business. So transmission had a customer service function that looked after the very large customers. In distribution, we actually had a customer service department that looked after the small, medium, residential and small power users, our commercial and industrial customers and so on. But really that was a function almost hidden within the main line of business of Eskom. And it was only in 2011 that we in fact created a customer service division focusing on, in fact, the customer service and the customer experience for all of Eskom's 5 million customers across the board. So we brought those elements together from the different divisions and created under a group executive of customer service, basically in the role, I think, of what you might call a chief customer officer that you see in many organizations, the customer service function. Now, that business of Eskom is in fact a very large business as well. As I've mentioned, we have 5 million customers. We have a fairly large contact center. It's in fact distributed across 7 sites in the country, of the order of about 500 agents handling about 5 million calls a year. That contact center was originally sited out in the region so that on the basis that local regions, customers phoned that local contact center. But obviously, as we've learned and as technologies enable us, we're moving towards a single national virtual contact center that will be far more efficient and able to deliver better service at lower costs. We have approximately 100 service hubs or walk-in type centers. We have about 10,000 plus payment points. Yet Eskom itself takes no cash. We are able to we work through agencies, and we in fact vend electricity and have electricity payments done without running any cash within our own walk-in centres ourselves. And we've got just under 3,000 customer service staff. We offer 24/7, obviously, the type of business we're in, we have to run 24/7. And we also offer service in the choice of 7 of the 11 official languages. I think we also were one of the first organizations in South Africa to actually start using SMS, interestingly enough. I can remember many years ago talking about how we wanted to use SMS campaigns to communicate with customers about power outages. And in those days, many people used to come afterwards and say, gee, we'd like to learn from you. And now, of course, use of SMS, whenever you pay for groceries at the supermarket or whatever, is such a ubiquitous thing. But I'm proud to think that we actually had something to do with the start of that trend. We manage a lot of money. Our revenue is 127 billion a year. That's a massive amount of money. I'm sure that many of you would be very keen to have a revenue base of that sort of size. And just in terms of some of our customer satisfaction surveys, and I'll talk a little bit more about this and give some examples a bit later on, but we have what we call customer care, which is where we measure the customers' perceptions of recent service transactions, and we're running at about an 84% satisfaction level on that. And we also have a more general perception survey where we're running at around about 93%. That's not tied to specific service events recently, it's more general image and reputation. And then our top customer category, which obviously is the ones that are the very large power consumers, where we have customer service executives that deal with them on a one-to-one basis rather than using channels like the contact center. There we're in fact running at a satisfaction rating of around 105%. For those customers. And that's quite a tall order, and a lot of credit goes to those customer executives that we actually have managing the relationship with those large customers, because particularly in the last 5 years, we've called on those customers a lot to actually help us out of the trouble that we've been having with our capacity constraints. Whenever the power system gets tight, they are the first customers that we go to and ask them if they can curtail from production, cut back on consumption. So I think to keep high levels of customer satisfaction amongst those customers at the same time as actually damaging their businesses has taken a lot of effort from our customer executives. Some of the challenges that we're facing, and I don't know if it came out clearly, but in the background of that slide there's a very faint rain cloud, which is one of the challenges that we have. But obviously in an organization like ourselves, it's a very hazardous operation that we run. So safety is a major concern. There's not only safety of our own people and our contractors, but safety of the general public, and that's an ongoing given that we have to concentrate on that. I've already mentioned the tightly balanced power system. I'm not going to go into the history and the reasons behind that. We did successfully until last month manage to stave off that horrible load shedding, which the press and the media seems to think we've made up a word to try and cover it up. They call it rolling blackouts, and they talk about Eskom's euphemism for rolling blackouts being load shedding. Believe me, it is load shedding. It's not rolling blackouts. But we've managed to keep that alive. Now, I do, just while I have the stage, want to say that this is going into a very, very tight period. We predicted that the winter of this year, going until the period when Kusile and Medupi come on stream, is going to be difficult. Now, we want to avoid, and I don't want to use the word at all costs because it is very costly, but we do want to try and avoid that horrendous situation that we had back in 2008. I mean, the traffic today was bad enough with the robots working. We all know what it was like back then. And so my appeal to you personally, each one of you has got a digital controller that you can use to switch off when you're not using it, because really every little bit, the power of one definitely helps in this game. That's my marketing, my demarketing ploy. We must be the only company I know that's trying desperately not to sell our product. The economy, the recession that started in 2008 actually helped us. It actually reduced volumes of consumption in the country, and that actually helped us through this period. But it also means that our revenue is curtailed. And also going with that, the tough economy does also lend to the bit of negative side of human behavior, electricity theft, non-payments, those kind of things happen as well. And those are some of the challenges that we're facing as well. Now, with things facing you like that as an organization, I think it would be very easy for management and leadership to sit around the boardroom table and really start contemplating their navels and looking at what we can do within the organization to try and solve these problems. And it would be very easy for us not to focus on the customers at all. We're a monopoly, we're regulated, and out there, we could take the attitude that, well, we give it to the customers, take it or leave it. But I want to assure you that that's not our approach. And in fact, we've been working very hard for a long time, as I indicated earlier, to try and become more customer-centric and to provide a better customer experience. Back in 1995, we didn't even have a call center. We used to have numbers in the telephone book that customers would call, and in fact, you would probably be put through to the local depot, where you would be able to tell the guy that your electricity was out, and they would send somebody out to fix it. What happened, of course, is that depot used to close at 5 o'clock, maybe 4:30 on a Friday, and when those people went home, we put marvelous technology in. We put in answering machines. And that answering machine would say, well, this is, for example, the Melmoth depot. We're closed for the evening, but this evening Fani is on duty, and Fani can be contacted at this number. And of course, as a customer, you would then redial and you'd speak to Fani, and he was the standby technician on duty, and he would get in his vehicle and he would go out to sort your fault. Now, of course, any customer that phoned after that got the answering machine, phoned Fani's number, and we didn't have cell phones. So we got Fani's wife, and all through the night Fani's wife was our call center. Now that was basically the reality of the type of situation that we had in Eskom in those days. And I guess, that was where it was. So we realized that there was something in this world of customer service, something in this discipline, in fact, that we could learn from. And in 1997, we actually were involved in putting together Eskom's first contact centers. And we learned a lot about best practice. We learned a lot about computer systems and computer telephony integration and ACDs and IVRs and all of these things, even quality management. And we tried to do these things. We went for CRM. We put in a CRM in around about 2005, having just worked on what we called a contact logging system. And basically, we've evolved from doing a lot of things and in-house developed systems and really learning as we went to where we now stand, where I think we've got some of the best tools in the toolbox in terms of customer service systems in electricity utilities worldwide. We have the new customer service division that we've spoken about. We've even created within the Eskom Academy of Learning at Midrand a special school for teaching customer service, the customer service discipline. A little bit more about that later. So it's been a long story, but I just wanted to show you some statements that we had back from the past. This was a statement of our strategic direction for customer service back in 1995. And that was the days when, in fact, the government was looking at this whole unbundling of the electricity industry in South Africa, the idea of dismantling Eskom, dismantling the municipalities, and creating what was called regional electricity distributors. And what we tried to do at that stage was create, within this Titanic, create some flexibility, that we could actually start supporting this concept of unbundling. So what we saw is that we needed to be able to run autonomously in different regions. That was where the idea of the 7 contact centers, in fact, came from, that each region had its own contact center which could run as an islanded unit within its own regional electricity distributor. We had to have flexibility and so on. But really not much mention in that wording about the customer. Fast forward about 10 years, and that was the statement in our customer service strategy around about 2005. And you could see we'd introduced something like a value proposition, that efficient customer service is seen as Eskom is easy to do business with, bringing in the customer connotation, but an efficient customer contact cost. And we were really striving in those days for this win-win balance between cost and customer satisfaction. And what I think we'd realized was that in customer service, very often, you are transacting and you're dealing with huge volumes. And huge volumes times small amounts of money actually adds up to large amounts of money. And so what we were looking at was how can we make our systems that we'd put in place, our contact centers and so on, how could we make them run more effectively? How could we improve our processes? How could we improve the quality of the work that we're doing in customer service in order to try and make that customer get a better service level from us and hence a better experience? The customer service channel strategy that you saw there was also moving into, at those days, was the new world, away from face-to-face. Most of our customers traditionally were always dealt with on a face-to-face basis. They queued, they came into our walk-in centers. We wanted to encourage them to use the call centers, starting to move into self-service and so on. And of course, things like the multimedia, not the multimedia, but the social media that we heard about a little bit earlier, at that stage wasn't even really on our radar system. Probably in people in other marketplaces a bit more, but certainly not in ours. And I was chuffed the other day. Did you see the Nando's Eskom little to and fro? I actually went, yes, I actually work for a cool company. Because really, and I think it harked back to the previous Nando's situation where they'd taken the mickey out of the guy in the bar with the waiter who was changing behind. I mean, there was actually a brilliant case study about that whole advert on TV, and Nando's ripped it off. And then eventually, I think the original insurance company, was it? See, advertising doesn't work for me. But that company challenged Nando's to donate food to an orphanage because they ripped off their advert, and they did it. Now, in this case, for those of you who don't know, Nando's put an ad out there saying, hey, Eskom, now that you've realized that coal gets wet when it rains, here's another kind of basic fact for you. And they kind of put a little bit of a thing together, and our social media people responded on our Facebook page with something like, hey, Nando's, thanks for the grilling, but we're trying to keep the lights on so that you can sell your chicken. So again, I think there was a little bit of this to and fro, which never would have happened in Eskom of the past. 2008, it was a clampdown. There was little communication. As an employee within Eskom, and trying to fly around the country, I'd sit in the airport, in the waiting room to fly up to Joburg from Durban to come and help with the situation, and I would actually hide behind a newspaper because I really didn't want to be, kind of accosted by colleagues who would say, what's going on. And I think that's one of the changes that we're seeing. We're seeing leadership being more prepared to tell the truth and being able to explain a bit more and laugh at ourselves, which I think is so important. Sort out the serious problems, but do it with a sense of humor. I think on the bottom of that slide is quite an important point as well, that all of this is built on a foundation of good business. And in our world, what we said was good business was standard processes and practices, good data, and good people. And we've actually tried to work on those three foundations all the way through this process as well. And bearing in mind that this was from 1995 to 2005, the strategy actually has taken a major shift. Because back in 1995, it was create autonomy, create independence, create regionalization. And now we're saying that, in fact, standardization across the country is a cost benefit. So, in those days also, we were fortunate to be recognized within the industry. Our CRM implementation won some international awards, and we also won a few contact center awards. So it was almost like, for me, the most exciting time of our journey at those stages. It was new stuff, it was brilliant stuff, and we were putting in a lot of these new things, and we really seemed to be learning how to do it and doing well. But what did our customers say about all of this? Now, Eskom uses a tool from the Reputation Institute called RepTrack. And if you look at the sort of top two quadrants of that, it talks about performance and products and services. So in other words, what they're saying is that these are the elements that affect the image of your company. And certainly the products and services that you deliver and the performance with which you do that are two key elements of image. Around those days as well, J.D. Power in the United States also did a bit of a study in the utilities industry to say what affects the customer's perceptions of an electricity company. And it was things like the overall company image, price and value, power quality and reliability, billing and payment, and customer service. Now, what we've tended to concentrate on in our model, and I know we're still talking about satisfaction, and that's kind of like old news, but remember, we're Eskom, we do things a little slower. We're still aiming for it. I think it's a good principle. Keep your customers satisfied, move on to that 100% delight later. But what we're really saying is that the areas that we measure when we ask customers what they think of us is, what do you think of our technical performance? In other words, how we respond and your quality of supply that you get on an ongoing basis. What do you think of how we perform when we bill and handle your payments for you? What do you think of our service channels, our contact center, our website, our app, etc.? And tariff comes into it as well. What do you think of the value for money that you're getting in terms of the electricity you're buying? Now, I just wanted to show you this graph, which goes back many years. In fact, goes between 2004 and 2007. And in this area over here was where we actually implemented I just want to make sure I push the right button here. That was the area where we implemented our CRM system. And you can actually see for this particular index, now this customer service index of ours is actually a composite measure which contains some customer satisfaction feedback as well as some performance on how well we deliver on certain technical things in the business. And we combine that in an index. So it's a composite reflecting our performance as well as the customer's response to that. And traditionally, we'd actually always been under the target. But what we managed to do once we implemented the CRM was set ourselves on the right path. The CRM system actually helped us in managing all our interactions with customers and making sure that they were executed and done properly, and you saw that trajectory rise. And in fact, that continued right up until just before the load shedding period of 2008. What we also did in around about 2005, late 2005, was we started working within the organization as well on top of that with things like making this measure part of how our employees were compacted and measured in terms of their performance. Previously, it had not been in the compacts, but now that customer service index became an important measure in the compact, so people were required to move towards that target in order to ensure that their remuneration grew or their bonuses came out. The CRM system that we'd implemented, we started seeing a little bit of a tailing off around that period because people had got used to it, but they hadn't really entrenched its use in the business. And you started getting a little bit of workarounds, a little bit of that old regional kind of flavor of doing it ourselves came through. And what happened was that people were starting to work around the system rather than inside the system. So we entrenched that. We said if it was not logged in the CRM system, it never happened. And we made sure that everybody used that system. We put management focus on, within the CRM system, cases that were going overdue and escalated. In other words, if you had reported a service request, maybe you wanted your bill rectified or whatever, and we had certain targets for each type of interaction, and if that went overdue or escalated, then what we did was we got managers on a weekly basis to make sure that those items were cleared out. And we also held frontline staff orientation works on strategy, so the people could understand what we were doing and the direction we were heading in. Now, I mentioned MaxiCare earlier. It's that general perception of service, and you can actually see clearly what happened in 2008 when the actual load shedding period actually caused a major drop in that measure, very, very short-lived drop. Now, what we actually did in response to that, we actually probably underestimated the grace of our customers, because we actually assumed that the entire image of Eskom thing and the whole issue around load shedding and the fact that we were now starting to talk about putting up the costs so greatly over the 5-year periods would have such an impact on MaxiCare that we actually backed off on the target, and we said we'd actually think. And in hindsight, very often, if you think negative thoughts, they come to pass. We probably shouldn't have done that. We should have had the confidence to say that we could recover. But in fact, we did recover. Recovered much more rapidly than we expected, and we've kind of kept it sort of stable, but it has fluctuated up and down over the period for the last couple of years since then. There are lots of things being done to try and push that up above the sort of magic barrier of 95 in terms of very detailed looking at processes, how we can improve the quality of the processes, how we can fix bottlenecks, etc. Maybe for me, one of the gaps is that I still feel we're not asking the customers enough what they expect from us. We tend to still have a little bit of that arrogance that we think we know best, and we hesitate to ask sometimes what the customers think. Now, customer care, that was the one where there's a recent service interaction. We ask you specifically about that event. That rocketed up once we implemented the CRM system, and in fact, that stayed very high. So there's clear evidence there that our CRM system actually helped us to get, from a transactional point of view, customers content that how we were servicing them worked. But when they looked at Eskom in the general context in MaxiCare, the perceptions and the bigger issues around Eskom and the publicity and the leadership issues and all of those things tended to, I think, inhibit the way that they score us. So we tried to draw some conclusions from that. And obviously, we're saying that customer perceptions are heavily impacted by those overall big picture things. And also, it's okay to get your customers happy with individual transactions. But there's something missing. And I think what's missing is, in fact, this whole people side of the thing. Creating a culture of customer centricity within the organization. Actually creating the fact that customer service is a discipline. Much like engineering or accounting, the traditional disciplines that we've had in Eskom are disciplines in their own right. I think customer service is a discipline. Maybe there's a body of knowledge. There certainly is. There are best practices. One of the things maybe from an academic point of view is you don't really go and do a degree in customer service per se. And maybe that's a pity. But certainly there is a body of knowledge. There's a discipline in customer service. So we've tried to entrench that concept in our customer service people to say, you are professional customer service practitioners. And this is how we want you to think and how we want you to behave. And there's some of the changes that we've tried to install. From the fact that I think that I work in an energy business to actually I work in a customer service business. If I'm a great call center agent in Eskom, there's nothing stopping me from going to work in a bank or an insurance company or a pizza delivery or whatever, airline call center. I'm part of the call center, the customer service fraternity. So we've tried to inculcate that thinking so we're not islanded. From functional to process thinking. We were very, very strong on the one-stop service in Eskom before. Now what we're saying is one contact resolution is the mantra. Try and get this done correctly first time. Even the jobs of people, there were people in customer service that were working at filling in ledgers and so on. Now we've got people that are knowledge workers, sitting in call centers, sitting in back offices, dealing with knowledge and information. And it's a step change from the way our people were working. So, Customer Centricity Program, in about 2011 we actually launched this program. It was around the time of the creation of the new division. In fact, a lot of this work went into informing how this new division was structured and how it was created. But I just wanted to share with you some of the drivers that we had for this program. And you can see that it was pretty wide-ranging if you compare it with the old strategies of the past. We were now looking at things like, is our leadership and culture customer-centric? We've got the old things like performance and so on, but what about our people? Have they got the capacity and the capability to be great customer service practitioners? What about customer insight and intelligence? All that data and information that we gathered, are we actually using it to mean something and understanding what the customers are wanting and what they're telling us? We had from the legacy of the past, we had these different divisions in Eskom, each with their own customer service function, each had their own strategy. We brought that into an integrated strategy. We looked at still wanting to optimize the delivery, the cost of service to our customers. Because at the end of the day, the cost of the service influences the tariff that we pay. So it's been a long road. We started in 2011. The first stage was setting up, and we also addressed some short-term things on the next slide. I'll show you. We called it customer noise, things that customers were particularly unsatisfied with. And I think there's a great difference between sorting out customer dissatisfaction and creating customer satisfaction. We sometimes, I think, get the two, we think they're the same thing, but actually they're not. You need to actively take away sources of customer dissatisfaction, and you actually need to work actively towards creating satisfaction. The second phase was the full rollout, and we're really now in the third phase, which is much more addressing the hearts and minds of the people. Now, some of those quick wins that we addressed with the sources of noise largely went around communication. And it was interesting, just in the last week, I actually heard somebody at a course I was at say that we're very fond of talking about the fact that there's a communication problem. You go into any company, any organization, any family, and we talk about the fact that there's a communication problem. This gentleman held that there's in fact not a communication problem. It's a representation problem. And in fact, we are not short of means of communication. We saw some of them earlier. But it's the way that we address the information, the way we put it across, that in fact is the shortcoming. And so what we did, we had a lot of these channels in place already, like SMS notifications and so on. But we worked quite hard at making the messages more understandable and more user-friendly to the customers. And we also tried to bring more of a face. Our newly appointed group executive for customer service, we used YouTube-type videos to actually create messages to customers that were put up on our website, and we actually advertised them in our bills to customers, that you can go and hear the GE talking about your billing or how we deal with the fault, etc. So we tried to make the whole mystery of Eskom a little bit more user-friendly. In the longer term, under the CCP program, we addressed quite a lot of, and I apologize, that slide is very detailed, but for those of you that do want to go through it, I think there's probably some good information that you might pick out of it later. But it was things like we established a customer service nerve center. We had nerve centers looking at system control and power stations and all of these things. We now have a nerve center that's focusing on what is the customer experiencing right now. What is the call center service levels like? What are the outages out there that are affecting customers and so on? Processes, systems, segmentation. We revamped our entire segmentation model for the company, realizing that we need to understand our customer segments, what those customers expect, and use that to drive the organization forward. In March of 2013, we brought another tool into Eskom across the board, not only in customer service. That's the ISO 9001. We've become accredited as a quality organization. And what's for me exciting is that having put these building blocks in place, we now have a tool for controlling and making this thing work. And ISO is a brilliant tool for that. ISO has very large elements of customer focus and customer service in it. And so we are very strong on bringing those audit and control requirements into our processes through ISO. And there's the customer focus aspect. And as an Eskom guardian, am I customer focused? That bigger thing. We also did some re-engineering in 2013 within customer service, and we followed quite a good model, which was a very customer-focused model to review our organization, review where we were, and look at how we move forward. So we started with our customer segments, the channels, the products and services. We analyzed all of these things right down to eventually, at the end of the day, the physical structure of where we deploy people. And our criteria there was, does this change that we're proposing improve customer service and customer centricity? Does it help us to improve our revenue collection? Does it help us to reduce our cost to serve, etc.? So we had clear criteria as we analysed in our re-engineering. Now, the re-engineering was a little bit of a preemption of, in fact, what Eskom has now embarked on. You may be aware that NERSA only granted us an 8% increase instead of the 16% that we'd asked for. Whether you're saying yay NERSA or yay Eskom on that, I'll leave that up to you. But nevertheless, it provides us with a massive problem. In terms of our ability to collect revenue, that 8% to 16% change means that over the next 5 years, we cannot collect 225 billion of revenue. Now, that's 225 billion of revenue of cost that we then have to take out of the business in order to compensate for that gap. So we've organised or launched a massive program within Eskom. It's called the Business Productivity Program. And in addition to other savings in the operations, this program alone is aimed at saving between 50 and 60 billion of money in the company. It's massive. Now, in the middle here, I've just highlighted revenue management because that's an area that in the customer service division we're very involved with. That's making sure that we get in the revenue for the electrons that are flowing down the wires, turning the meters that customers are not paying us for. We really need to get that money in. It's billions of rands, and we need to get that money in. So what will Eskom look like in 2018? Certainly from a cost point of view, and here's a typical old Eskom type slide again, even though it's as current as this year, that we see the organisation being transformed into a cost-effective organisation, one that's efficient, etc., etc. Now, on top of that, what are we going to see from a customer perspective? And this is our vision within the organisation for the customers. That customers will have a positive customer interface experience. They will be handled by professional practitioners at the front line who deal with them in a professional way and deliver a quality service. Access to a range of channels, etc., etc. So while we as an organisation are scrambling to meet this challenge of the huge cost cutting that we have to do, in parallel with that, we have to meet this kind of customer expectation. And after all, the theme of the conference is customer experience is what makes good business. And I think we nearly need to adopt that within Eskom almost as a slogan and say that without this, all the cost cutting in the world will not make a sustainable business of the company. So thank you very much. And I hope that you may have found that interesting.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Please don't go away. We are going to take a few questions. Thanks to you, we previously thought South Africa's richest resource was gold and diamonds. Now we know it's dry coal. Kevin, I think you really have to have a good disposition and a pleasant personality, which is definitely something you've got from chatting to you earlier, because I'm sure you're always receiving flack representing Eskom. You get asked the toughest questions, no doubt, so prepare yourselves. Mm-hmm. He's open to it. Thank you for being the face of Eskom. At some stage, we were beginning to see Eskom as Amazon.com mm-hmm. without a face, and it's lovely that you have these projects that target customer experience. It's really great because I tell you something, I was going to ask for Fani's number and his wife's number. So very excited about all your upcoming projects. Questions, folks? Do we have questions? Yep. Dave?
I'm sprinting. Well, I'm moving as fast as I can.
Yes, that's not sprinting.
Kevin, I just want to know, how will you be translating that all the wonderful work that you've been doing to your distribution channel, like the municipalities? Because I think that's where, if we think of Eskom, sort of the face of Eskom is really your municipalities, and we all have third-party areas that represent us. How do you translate that customer experience to the municipalities? Good luck with that, by the way.
I think the wrong answer to that would be to say that they're actually not part of us. They're separate companies. They buy from us, and we have nothing to do with that. What we try and do is we've actually had programs called Adopt a Municipality, particularly for the struggling and ailing municipalities, that we've actually tried to use some of the expertise in Eskom to actually work within those organisations to try and share knowledge and develop the expertise within them. We also do and try and do benchmarking, but really it goes around a dialogue, because I think what you're really talking about is the competence or the service delivery, if you like, of the electricity industry as a whole. And within Eskom, we can try things, but we cannot force these things upon those distributors of ours. So it really is more kind of a coaching, guiding, that kind of a role that we do. One of the visions that we have for the School of Customer Service that we created would be that it would be a place where people in the industry generally, not only in South Africa, i.e. from the municipalities, but even from other African states, could send in order to have their people trained. We're not there yet, but that's part of the vision. If that answers your question.
Okay, thank you for that. We're going to take one more question, just one more, before we break. Anyone? Yes, here?
So I guess the question is, if you had a competitor, you could still be in business.
That's a great question.
Okay, our competitor is the last guy who gave our customer good service.
Well done.
And while I say that, in fact, I really went yay when that was said earlier, because that is in fact what we had to go through with trying to create this whole thing of the customer service practitioners and the customer centricity. Many people in Eskom said, we don't have competitors, who cares? And we actually said, our customer, when they phone our call center, has just phoned the bank, has just phoned the airline, whatever, and we've got to actually adopt that principle. So yeah, I think competitive, real competition, if you want to call it, actually does drive an organization a lot quicker. I mean, you know, the sort of timescales that I spoke to you about, I don't think an organization out in the competitive world would have survived with the kind of timescales that we've been talking about. But in the utilities industry, that's kind of more like the pace that we work with. But certainly, I think competition is healthy, and it would benefit the customers at the end of the day.
Thank you very much. That was Kevin von Berg. Thanks for joining us today.